What is up, guys? Sosa MMA back with another video. Later than I normally upload by quite a bit. Today sucked pretty bad, but what hasn't sucked lately is the engagement on the recent video, so I really appreciate that from all of you guys. If you like this one, make sure to leave a like and comment whose aura in the UFC you guys think is the strongest. But that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Which fighter in each UFC weight class has the most unbeatable aura? And when I'm talking about aura here, in case you guys aren't familiar with the concept, I'd venture to guess most of you are, but I'm not just talking about like my favorite fighter in each weight class, or like the most dominant fighter even necessarily in each weight class, because possibly be dominant without really having like a great aura. If I can explain that when I get to like a later weight class, like perhaps when I talk about welterweight with Leon Edwards. But with the aura tier list here, we're going to be talking about essentially how much a fighter's energy is felt when you're watching them and when you're in there in the cage with them. So sometimes I'll talk about what other fighters have described, or what other fighters look like when they were in the cage with these fighters, or I'll talk about the sort of performances that these fighters tend to put on and stuff like that, to kind of illustrate really just how impressive these auras can be. Let's get it started with one of the weakest divisions for aura. Very easy pick here. It's got to be the flyweight champion, Alexandre Pantoja. So on the feet, he's actually kind of ass. Now, obviously, he's UFC caliber, so he's not terrible, but he's not super defensively sound, just really likes winging bombs, but he's got that dog in him. So, I mean, look at his fights with Moreno. You can see Moreno catching him with stuff that he knows should hurt Pantoja, and then it just doesn't, and Pantoja continues to walk forward at him, and he's almost kind of like scared by it, because he knows that he can land his best shots on him, that Pantoja is not going to defend them, but that it still doesn't matter, and he's just going to get walked down by this dude who's arguably worse than him on the feet, but just has that dog in him, more than Brandon Moreno, who also has that dog in him. And then you know you're boned if it hits the mat. That's not necessarily because the submission game is crazy. It is super good. So if you're not like elite level, he will find a submission on you for sure. But he will also have the jiu-jitsu caliber and the strength at flyweight to completely hold you down for the rest of the fight if you don't get up, or have the explosiveness to get up, rather, is what I was trying to say, or have some way to get a good submission attempt or something to initiate a scramble with him. But that's going to be tough too, because jiu-jitsu is so good. So it does make it really fucked if you hit the mat with him. Doesn't mean you're necessarily in a ton of danger, but you do know that there's very few ways for you to beat this guy, is what it feels like right now. Somebody will do it. For example, Steve Urseg at UFC 301 when he knocks him out. But right now, that aura is feeling pretty strong. And that's one thing too. Just because a fighter is strong in the aura right now doesn't mean that this is like, oh, this guy's never going to lose, anything like that. It just means that right now they're riding a really strong aura. So there's some guys on this list like Pantoja and like another guy later on that I predict will lose their next fight. But their aura right now is something that we need to respect and behold in their respective weight classes, and that's exactly what we're going to do at bantamweight. And Merab Dvalishvili, I am actually predicting, assuming he gets booked against Sugar Sean O'Malley, to lose his next fight, which is kind of a controversial prediction because it seems a lot of people think Merab is some nightmare matchup that's just going to ragdoll Sugar, and I don't really see that happening, to be honest with you. But we're not talking about that in this video. If you guys want to hear about that prediction, let me know in the comments down below. But what we're going to talk about is his fights with Marlon Moraes and Henry Cejudo. Because in those fights, he got clipped. And he didn't win the round against Moraes because Moraes emptied the tank trying to finish Merab. But against Henry, he got clipped and still managed to even win that round, which is pretty impressive. But what this kind of illustrates more than anything is that unless you have the power to put him out outright, Just clean knock him out, or get him so fucked up that the ref stops the fight and he is like upset at the stoppage because he's still that durable too. You're not getting this guy out of here. And if you're not getting him out of here, you're fucked, buddy. You are boned, because he doesn't even have to succeed at his game plan in its entirety to beat you, because he wants to take everybody he fights in the UFC down. Make no mistake about that. And he probably wants to control them on the ground too. He's just not super good at ground control. So he's evolved his game to weaponize his insane gas tank to shoot 50 takedowns, fail as many of them as he needs to, and if he can't finish any of them, just hold you against the fence and not let you win the fight. And if you can't win the fight, then Merab wins the fight. And can it be boring at times? Yeah. I think the Peter Yan fight was boring at times. And I think the Jose Aldo fight was boring the entire time, pretty much. But his aura is undeniable. When you're in there with Merab, you've got to knock him the fuck out. Or get a technical submission if you're Ricky Simone. But that was a while ago, so I don't know if it really counts towards the aura we're talking about today. And I think Sugar Sean can knock him out, which is why I'm predicting him to do that. But if you can't, you're fucked, buddy. You're fucked. Because it doesn't even matter if your grappling is better than his. Like I said, he'll just hold you against the fence. And can you break away from the fence? Yeah, but it takes energy to do that. And then he's going to be shooting again. And it takes energy to defend that and then get off the fence and break from the clinch again. And he has more energy than you. I don't care who you are. So the only way to beat him is to submit him. And I don't think he's going to tap. So you either have to choke him out or break his fucking arm or something. Or knock him the fuck out. You've got to finish this guy. Because I don't see any bantamweight beating him by decision right now. Not any bantamweight that's in the UFC. Especially not over the course of 5 rounds. You're fucked, buddy. At featherweight, we're going to be looking at Ilia Topuria. It would have been Volk, but god damn it, Volk. Alright, sorry. I had to take a moment there. Ilia set himself up for one of the worst humblings in UFC history, dude. Can you imagine if on February 18th, while he's still in California, he has to log on to his Instagram account, change his bio to 14-1 from 15-0, remove a win and add his first loss, then change his profile picture to not have the UFC belt anymore, and change UFC champion to UFC featherweight contender, bro. After never having had the belt, bro. That would have been rough. It looked like he was setting himself up for it, too. He was doing all the Conor wannabe stuff, too, like grabbing the belts off of the table during the press conference, wearing Volk's belt during pictures before the fight and stuff like that. Everything to set himself up to get humbled, and he didn't at all. And another really scary thing for his aura is that you haven't really seen a ton of his grappling in an offensive capacity in the UFC. You saw some of it against Bryce Mitchell, some of it in round 5 against Josh Emmett, none of it in the Volkanovski fight. You don't really see it a ton anymore, but he actually started as a grappling heavy fighter. Most of his early wins before the UFC are by submission, and now he has hands. So it actually makes him a super interesting matchup against a ton of grapplers, because you could see a grappling heavy fight and get to see further tests of his grappling prowess, which looked fantastic against Bryce Mitchell. And while he's had some losses since then, I think it's actually just that that Josh Emmett one, right? And then he picked up a win against Dan Ige in the meantime as well. Bryce Mitchell hasn't been fraud tested in the grappling at all, except for against Ilia Topuria, who tossed him around like a sack of potatoes. Sorry, I was messing with my mic there. If there was like a big jump up in audio, that's why. Sorry about that. And then one other thing too is that he's young as fuck. So the fact that he already has the belt is kind of scary for these other dudes who gotta mess with this guy for a while now. It's not really a super appetizing prospect unless you're someone like a Max Holloway, who might match up kind of well with him. Maybe a Yair Rodriguez, since he's got vulnerability to those head kicks because of his movement and some of those defensive irresponsibilities. But Yair just lost, so that makes it to where it's even longer before we'll see something like that. And I don't think the Eagle Brian Ortega is going to tap him either, because I think he's too good on the ground. I think he might come close a couple of times, but I just don't. I think that Brian Ortega is just going to set himself up to get his generational ass beating like he does every time there's a new champ. And I'll be watching for sure. But I just don't see anybody beating this guy for a while. And he's got one of the stronger auras, I think, in the UFC. But he's just kind of underrated because people don't like how cocky he is in terms of his aura. So a lot of people aren't a huge fan of him. But so we're on to 155. Now this pick is kind of an interesting one. And you might think, well, Islam beat him, right? So how can he have such a strong aura? And I think the reason for that is more than anything that while I really enjoy Islam, he's my favorite fighter that's active in the UFC right now. I don't know, man. There's just something about Charles's aura in that, like, if you see Islam get hurt in a fight, you're worried about Islam. You know, you're like, oh shit. Islam's rocked. Like, if you're an Islam fan, your eyes will open. And I'm not saying that when Charles gets rocked as a Charles fan, you aren't worried about Charles. But you're also, like, super worried about the other guy. And that's not really the case with Islam. Like, I'm not super worried that Islam's going to get rocked and then Justin Gaethje's going to get finished by, like, a triangle choke as he goes down to finish Islam. But I am worried that Justin Gaethje would do something like that against Charles if he tried to go to the ground with Charles, which is why he didn't do that, right? Which was kind of a smart move from Justin Gaethje to a capacity there. But I think that kind of speaks to his aura. Another thing, whatever this thing that he does with his mouth before every fight where he's like messing with his jaw, it's like low-key kind of hard. It's like low-key kind of cool. But if any other fighter did it, I'd be trolling the fuck out of him. Like, if Islam did that shit, he's my favorite fighter, like I said, but he'd look so fucking stupid doing it. And Charles looks kind of stupid doing it too, but I don't know why. He can kind of get away with some shit like that. He's got the aura for it, man. I don't know how to accept. If Movsar Evloev did this shit before every fight, you motherfuckers would not hear the end of it from me or anybody else. That shit would be hilarious, dude. But when Charles does it, he kind of just gets a pass to do that. Then there's also the fact that he can finish you wherever the fight goes, and really at any point. He could cover the distance with some crazy ass crane kick and hurt you with that. He could throw up some high kick that's super fast and catches you off guard like he did with Beneil Dariush to initiate the finish there. He's got the best power in his hands at lightweight according to Justin Gaethje, but Gaethje hasn't fought Islam, and Islam low-key might somehow be a contender for that because he also put Charles down enough that he was able to submit him, which I think means that Charles was pretty compromised by the time Islam knocked him down. And obviously we haven't seen many people go for submissions on Charles when he's been rocked in his recent UFC run, but I do think that you would have to have Charles pretty fucked up to get that choke on him. And Charles did do some intelligent things to try and defend, but I still think that a fully there Charles Oliveira would be a lot harder to head and arm choke than it ended up being for Islam. And then also he's so dramatic. He's like crying all the time and shit, like before and after his fights. Always yelling and shit. He's just so fucking over the top, and it just adds to the aura, man. He's got those crazy ass suits he wears that are baller as hell. And he's always talking shit. He's just always talking shit to people he's fighting, and it helps that he's in a lot of matchups where the other guy's talking shit recently too. He didn't really talk much shit against Beneil, for example, but against like Islam and Gaethje there was some good shit talk. But yeah, he's got a very solid aura, very strong aura, and you know that against most lightweights that aren't named Islam Makhachev, he's gonna give him some serious fucking issues in the octagon. Moving up to 170, it was pretty simple here as well. Shavkat Rakhmonov, man. This guy doesn't even know what a decision is, dude. If you showed Shavkat Rakhmonov the 3 ways a fight can end, he'd ask you what the third one after knockout and submission is, because he doesn't know what that is. He's never won one, and he's never lost one. He's never seen one before. That's crazy. And I think now he's 18-0. which is just ludicrous to be 18-0 with nothing but finishes in a really competitive division too, not only in the UFC but globally in welterweight. There's a lot of guys that compete at welterweight. And Shavkat had some tough fights outside of the UFC too, where he got clipped and hurt badly, and he still managed to not only win those fights, but win them by finish. So that's pretty awesome. And he even somehow gets the finish when it makes no sense whatsoever. In this Jeff Neal fight, I don't know if you guys have watched this one recently or if you watched it live. If you haven't, treat yourself. Go back and watch this fight again because it's incredible. But Jeff Neal defends every single Shavkat takedown. And then in the round 3, he gets rocked badly by Shavkat. He rocked Shavkat badly in round 3 as well. But in round 3, he gets rocked badly by Shavkat. Shavkat shoots for the takedown because he realizes he's not going to knock Jeff Neal out. Somehow, while he's wobbling, he gets the safe Saud corner advice, defends the takedown perfectly, stays on his feet, and you're like, holy shit. Shavkat can't knock this guy out. He can't get him down to the ground. Jeff Neal is going to survive a fight with Shavkat. And then this motherfucker starts doing this shit all of a sudden. And you're like, what the fuck? Is he actually going to finish Jeff Neal with this like racially motivated ass choke right here? And then he did. It's crazy. And I feel like he should have been arrested because it really does feel like, especially like with the look on Jeff Neal's face here, like it feels like you're watching a crime take place while you look at this fight and watch it. Like you witnessed something that you weren't supposed to see. And in the Wonder Boy fight too, it wasn't like evident super to me during the fight. I'd have to watch it back now. I haven't because it was kind of a boring fight. But he had a super bad injury that most fighters would have pulled out of a fight like that off of. And I forget what the injury was to now. I believe it was something in one of his legs. And he still took the fight and got the finish, which is incredible. And that's his worst performance in the UFC. I think most people tend to agree. His performance against Wonder Boy was kind of lackluster, kind of boring. But even in that, he was the first guy to ever sub Wonder Boy in his worst performance ever. And what I have here abbreviated is that he's kind of on a different standard than everyone else, which just shows you how strong that aura is for him. Because Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad both were able to take down and dominate Wonder Boy, and arguably had an easier time taking down Wonder Boy. How much of that is the Shavkat injury? Who knows? I think that his takedown entries have been overrated, and I think that Jeff Neal kind of demonstrated that as well. As much as Jeff Neal does have stellar takedown defense, I think that and the Wonder Boy performance together have kind of demonstrated some holes on tape that we might not have thought were there. But neither Burns or Bilal Muhammad. Burns, by the way, who gets glazed for his grappling all the time, they weren't able to finish him. They weren't able to sub him, weren't able to ground and pound TKO him, anything like that. And Shavkat becomes the first guy to ever sub him, and no one is trash-talking Burns' performance or Muhammad's performance. I guess everyone's shit-talking Bilal's performance because everyone shit-talks Bilal. But you might call it like an underwhelming Burns performance. But it's not to the degree that Shavkat was getting shit on for this performance, and it's because he's on a different standard than these other welterweights. 185 was tough. Is it Bo Nickel? I mean, he sparked out his last opponent within the first few striking exchanges, and with just one takedown in his UFC debut managed to tap out his opponent, but those were against Val Woodburn and Jamie Pickett. You boys crushing cans. He's not at the top of the Aura list. Is Khamzat Chimaev. Really solid argument for it. But Khamzat Chimaev's aura was so strong. One of the strongest we've seen in the sport at one point. That for him, even having a strong aura is such an aura weakening that I don't know if he can be at the top of the list. And we also haven't really seen him execute his aura at 185 because his aura in round 1 of that Usman fight, stellar. Killer. Round 2 and 3, man, I'm a Hamzat fan and I scored him for Usman. I scored that fight a draw. And he took it on short notice. And he's the way bigger guy. That's not good. It's not good for the aura, so. Hamzat ain't the aura champ at 185. And that left me one choice. And I didn't like it. I don't think you guys are going to like it either. But it's what has to happen. Dricus Du Plessis is the reigning 185 aura champ. Listen, guys. Listen. He refuses to be good at fighting. But he wins his fights anyways. There's some aura to that, you know? Like, goes into this Derek Brunson fight, gets horribly gassed out, getting ragdolled and hurt on the feet by Derek Brunson, bro. And then he somehow wins. Obviously, Brunson sucks too, but in terrible spots against Derek Brunson. And he still just decides to win. Gets matched up against Robert Whittaker. One of the fights where you had some people saying, guys, this is fucked up to do to Dricus. There was actually people saying that in the MMA community. And I remember I thought that this booking was too much too. I obviously didn't pick Dricus to win that fight. If you did, Dricus even thinks you're stupid. Dricus said that you shouldn't have picked him going into that Whittaker fight. That's literally a thing that he himself said, which is kind of a Chad thing to say as well. To say, like, hey, if you weren't in my camp, if you didn't know me, you'd be an idiot to pick me. You're either an idiot or you're lying if you say that. And that's kind of a Chad thing to say as well. But my main point here was that he gets in that fight with Robert Whittaker, and I remember trying to tell someone, like, hey, as much as I think he's going to get mogged and lose this fight really badly, he's earned it. He needs that escalation in competition, and there's nobody else that really makes a ton of sense for him to move up and fight here in the rankings. I think that this is what makes sense, even though he's going to lose it, and then he doesn't. I remember watching that round 1 and being like, okay, Robert Whittaker's starting out nicely. And then it started to become competitive on the feet. And I was like, okay, this isn't going so great. And then Dricus landed the takedown and started getting some good ground and pound. I was like, oh no. Like, this is going really badly, actually. And then round 2, Robert Whittaker gets hurt. And I was watching through slits in my fingers. I had to cover my eyes from what I was seeing. Because I was so taken aback by Dricus Du Plessis. And I always am. Not necessarily a good way either. But he always wins. So I can't say anything negative about that. And the last part here, I don't want to labor it, but he's built like an absolute Chad. It's ridiculous that he makes 185 and that he's like not missed weight in the UFC either. That's pretty crazy. And while the chick that he's with is not super hot, she's attractive for sure, but she's like a South African 9 for sure. And he still chooses to kiss men just because. That's just a decision he chooses to make. It's not what I would do, but he's just got a completely different aura than anybody else in the UFC. Sucks at fighting, still wins all of his fights. Can just have a blood and guts war with a fighter who's literally in the PFL now, and then just dominate, put on a master class against a former champion, someone who would have ruled his division for around a decade if Israel Adesanya didn't come to the UFC. You can't deny his aura. Whether you love Dricus or you hate Dricus, he's got the aura. 205 pounds is another example where I'm picking this guy to lose his next fight. A lot of you guys probably already know this, but his aura is crazy and probably will stay that way, maybe even after the knockout, because I didn't put it on this, but it's kind of crazy. We were all talking about after Volk's knockout, man, you cannot turn around this quick after that, Volk. This is a terrible idea. And let's see. So he fought at the end of October, ended up doing November, December, January, fought in like the early February. So he did turn around too quick in my opinion, but he got medically cleared to do that, right? And then Pereira got knocked out by Izzy in, had to have been April. Yeah, April of 2022. And then came back in, let's see, it was May, June, July. So like the same roughly time period, and in a higher weight class where he got his shit absolutely rattled by Izzy. You can't necessarily compare the Islam and the Pereira knockout here side by side to each other, since they are in different weight classes. You don't really know like the pound for pound damage each guy took to their noggin and how hard that would have been to come back from. But it is generally true that you're going to take a little bit more of a rocking up there at 205, at 185, and obviously you're more conditioned to and everything like that. But as well, while Volk was clearly very concussed from Islam's head kick and the following strikes, he was still conscious afterwards, whereas Poatan was like cold knocked out, like sleeping on the floor of the octagon, which is definitely worse, 100% worse. He came back sooner, fought someone up a weight class, so hitting harder, and obviously it's going to deplete his chin less too, but there is still a ton of risk in that. And he didn't ever really get hurt in that Jan Blachowicz fight or get caught with anything where you were super worried about it. So that kind of helps build his aura too. The fact he was able to just turn around that quick, say like, okay, fuck it, I lost my 185 belt, time to go get a new belt, and then he just does that. That's pretty crazy. This side-by-side of him and Strickland I think is crazy too. He looks nearly a full head taller than Strickland and way more full. It's just ridiculous they ever fought at the same weight class, especially because he still looks huge at 205. Something that low-key helps his aura too is that now he's in a division where like everyone sucks at grappling pretty much, and the only dude who's really good at grappling, and Magomed Ankalaev, said that he wouldn't take down Pereira if they fight. And I know everyone says that and ends up taking him down, and I think Magomed would be that way too, but I don't know if he would start doing it early enough. I low-key don't know if I'd pick Magomed in a fight with him, because I do think he's saying it honestly when he wants to strike with him, because he's kind of a fucking idiot and like has like a huge ego, and I don't know who he's trying to prove shit to, but he's trying to prove shit to fucking someone, dog. And he just wants to strike with everyone, even though I know that's like his main style, right? But there's these matchups where you could exploit your grappling mismatch, and against Pereira, there's no better time to, because Magomed has some of the best grappling at 205, and he's just not going to until he gets KO'd. Then he'll try, but then he's KO'd, so it doesn't matter anymore. And then also we had some questions about whether or not the power of the left hook translated up to 205. There wasn't questions if you'd watched his kickboxing career, but the left hook landed at times against Jan Blachowicz and didn't appear to seriously stun or damage him. But he landed it on Yuri, and the rest is history. So we know it hurts real bad, which definitely helps the aura, because one of the scariest strikes in all of mixed martial arts right now is Alex Pereira's left hook. But moving on to the last fighter on the tier list, Jon Jones is not in the heavyweight section of this tier list. Here's him getting kicked in the balls. The most significant strike Cyril Gane landed against him. By the way, all the French fuckers trolling me on my Man on Firat video, you remember this? That was the best strike your boy landed, alright? You got me on this one, on the Man on Firat Aaron Blanchfield stuff, but you remember this. You remember what happened after this, too. Alright? Alright. But Jon Jones isn't on this video. It's Tom Aspinall. There's a number of reasons. Jon Jones is number one, because it would be Jon Jones if he wasn't ducking Tom Aspinall. But if the GOAT is ducking you, dog, It kind of helps your aura, you know? You can literally tell people, John Jones is ducking me right now. John Jones is scared to fight me right now. And it's true. He is. Then, this part's kind of low-key the craziest of all of it. That Sergey Pavlovich fight, I don't know how many of you guys know this, because I haven't heard it discussed a ton after his fight. But he took that fight not only on short notice, but actually a few days before that call, he had received an injury that had him unable to walk, unable to move from his bed. And then a few days later, he gets the call, hey, you know that guy who just knocked 6 dudes out in the first round? Do you want to fight him on short notice for the heavyweight interim belt? And he said, sure. He said yes to that. He took that fight. And then he won. That's crazy, dude. That's actually insane. And I bet you Cyril Gane had a shot at that fight too. But he said, no. I wait for the title. Fuck you, Cyril Gane. Fuck you. Not only all that, but he also ended the longest knockout streak in UFC history. And he ended it by knockout. Aura. Through the roof. Sergey Pavlovich is on the Aura tier list instead of Tom Aspinall if he knocks out Tom Aspinall. Because he has that crazy-ass win streak all by knockout. And John Jones would duck him too. You know that. So, he'd have all of the same shit. Because he would also have the shortest fight time ever, which Tom Aspinall has instead. But that is the Aura tier list, guys. Let me know who you think has the strongest Aura in the UFC. Comment down below. Leave a like if you liked. Sub for more. Thank y'all. And peace.